All right, everybody, welcome back. It is a Friday afternoon around 4 o'clock. This is Bare Bones Talk. Today, we are going to be talking about income inequality, capitalism, and all the stuff that is conspiring to keep you from being rich. Pardon the cough. I am currently drinking a very cold beverage because I burned the living hell out of my tongue on some chicken soup this afternoon. So I'll probably be slurring my S's and things like that, but, forgive me. So, let's talk about money. Here's the fact of the matter. In this country, we have a serious income inequality and wealth inequality issue. There are a very small number of people that control an obscenely large amount of the wealth in this country, and it is driving the economy into ruin. It is impoverishing a huge amount of our American population, and it is not useful for anybody but that top 1%. And today we're going to talk a little bit about why that is. And hello, Copter, welcome back. So in order for us to really get a feel for this, we have to actually talk about what capitalism is and the misconception that a lot of Americans have about capitalism. So in basic terms, capitalism is what you find in an economic system where the capital class, meaning those who have the money, right, actually get to be the ones who control the economy, the political realities of the country, etc. All the means of production are controlled by individuals. They're operated for profit as their primary goal. What capitalism is not about free markets. It is not about opportunity. It is not about everybody getting ahead if they work hard. None of those things have anything to do with what capitalism is. Capitalism is about the rich owning and controlling everything and keeping everybody else out of the club. That's how it works. Okay? It's horrible, but that's how it works. I do need to take a quick look at Twitch because I suspect that something is off with the graphics here. So give me just a minute.
Come on in, everyone.
Let me
Just start
see
joining
how
here.
this is going here. Do we have here? So give me just. Actually, it seems to be working relatively
Come on in,
okay.
everyone. Just start joining here.
Weird. Okay. So, why are Americans so sold on capitalism? Well, they've been convinced that all the things I just talked about capitalism not being are actually what capitalism is. They believe that capitalism is about rewarding hard work. It's not. They believe capitalism is about opportunity. It's not. They believe capitalism is about being able to get ahead in life. It's not. Capitalism is about the wealthy class controlling everything and keeping it that way by any means necessary to the exclusion of anybody else. Okay? That's it. That's the whole entirety of it. And that is a system that works. And when I say it works, I don't mean it's beneficial. I mean capitalism, where the rich control everything, works in the sense of owning and controlling everything allows them to perpetuate their own ownership and control of everything. You got some sweet tea for the show, trying to lay off the coffee. Good idea. You've got a lot of stuff going on in your life. A little less caffeine might be good, although replacing that with a giant bucket of sugar with a little liquid in it may not be the thing to do. But we'll let you drink what you can drink. So in order to give you a little background, I have 2 college degrees earned with honors, one of which is in business and contains substantial coursework in economics, finance, accounting, and everything that goes with it. I understand what I'm talking about when it comes to these subjects. When you're in business school, you learn a lot about the capitalist system, and the simplest way I can explain this to you is the business school basically has 2 main focuses, or foci. The first one is teaching you how, if you're already rich, to stay that way and screw everybody else out of their money. And 2, how to try to overcome the insane obstacles that are in your way to ever becoming rich in a capitalist society. The academic term for that is called barriers to entry. Okay? Barriers to entry. They are the things that the already rich and powerful and the large businesses, etc., put in the way of everybody else to keep them the hell out of the club. Okay? Because as much as they like to say, the rising tide lifts all boats and blah, 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 in a capitalist system, they don't want you. They don't want your boat to lift, okay? Because capitalism and economies like ours are are called zero-sum games. And what that means in terms that, the simplest way I can explain it, is there is a finite amount of money in the economy, and it's not limitless. It doesn't just increase because you work hard. There's a certain amount of money available, and when that money is used up, there's no more. You can't get any more. And that used to be something backed by trade goods and metals like gold. But now it is what's called fiat currency, which is money created out of thin air by banking institutions, and it is essentially valueless, but it allows them to pretend that there's an infinite supply of the stuff by creating a nearly infinite supply, but still limited. So, Bear, you may be asking, how the hell does that work? And I'll tell you. When you unlink your country's money from any kind of actual, limited countable thing like ounces of gold, right? You have to back it with something. And in the United States, what it's backed with is this nebulous thing called the full faith and credit of the United States government, which, if you think about it, is this puff in the wind term that means literally nothing. So where we actually get our money is from an organization called the Federal Reserve Bank, which you may have heard of on every bill of currency that you have in your wallet, in your house, in your wherever. There's a stamp from the Federal Reserve Bank that issued that particular bill, that particular note. And there are 13 of them around the country. And they are not part of the U.S. government, okay? The way it's normally explained is the Federal Reserve is about as much a part of the United States government as Federal Express. It just happens to have the word federal in the name. Not giving my info. Based and anti-capitalism. I'm sure what you're trying to say is biased, and you're welcome to say that. I am biased against capitalism because capitalism is destructive and harmful and screws almost everybody. So yeah, I can be accused of being biased against it. In the same way I am biased against stabbing people in the eye with a sharp burning stick. So yeah, call me biased against it. That's fine. This is why I invest my money in stuff that doesn't lose its value. That is probably a very wise course of action. Although things that don't lose their value, you may or may not have picked the right things. You should do a lot of investigating to be sure of that. No, based is like cool. You're suggesting that anti-capitalism is a good thing? If that's what you're suggesting, then I'm on board with that. But yeah, if somebody wants to call me biased against capitalism, I am completely okay with that. Okay? So yeah. So we have these Federal Reserve Banks, which are not part of the United States government. And the Federal Reserve Act, which happened in the early 1900s, surrendered Congress's right to issue and control our currency to this private organization, which is a privately held bank. There is no official publicly available list of owners. Nobody outside that group actually knows who the actual owners are in their entirety. It is suspected that groups like the Rothschilds are heavy owners, but nobody is 100% sure of who all the owners of this bank are. Thank you for the follow, not giving my info, and welcome aboard. The Constitution of the United States assigns the ability to issue and control our economy and the currency within it to the United States government. It was blatantly unconstitutional to hand that away, and it took the Federal Reserve Act to make that happen, which is something that patriotic presidents and Congresses had been fighting against for the 140 some years before bankers successfully made that happen. But that means what happens to get money into your hands is the United States government actually has to borrow money from the Federal Reserve, and it charges interest on that money. So that is an incredibly destructive thing, and I know this is going to sound like hyperbole, but it is not when I say that the instant that happened, it destroyed the economy It was just a question of how long it would take for it to become visible. And here's how this works. Let's say, just for the sake of argument, that the entire argument is me, bare bones, and any one of you in the chat. So imagine that you and I are an economy of two people. And in this entire economy, there are exactly two things of value. There are $100 bills, and there are two loaves of bread. Okay, each of us has half of it. So you have $50 and and one loaf of bread, and I have $50 and one loaf of bread. That's fair. That's equitable. Everybody has an equivalent share of the economic resources in this scenario. So if I come up to you and I say, I would like to have all the bread in this economy, and I'm willing to give you money in exchange for your bread, if I'm going to end up with all the bread, how much money should you end up with? And the answer is you should end up with all the money if I'm going to end up with all the goods. Okay, that's, again, fair and equitable. Whereas, anything else would be, by definition, an unfair deal to at least one of us. But let's say that you want my chunk of bread, and I say, sure, but you don't want to give me all of your $50. And I say to you, that's fine. We'll have an easy payment plan where you can give me $5 a month for 11 months, and then I will give you my bread. What I've just done there is essentially extended you a line of credit with interest on it. Because you are now, in exchange for getting the bread now, going to owe me $55. Because I said $5 a month for 11 months. But there's a little problem there. And if you can spot the problem ahead of time, you're ahead of most people in this country, because you are seeing something about economics that most people don't. Which is there's only $101 bills in this whole economy. I've got 50 of them already. You've got 50, and you've just agreed to give me 55. So once you run out of your $50, you default on your agreement. I still have 100% of the money, but now I get to come and take your bread because you're in default of it. So now I end up with all the money and all the goods. And that's how the economy getting its money from an outside entity from which the United States has to borrow the money at interest destroyed the economy the moment it happened. Because the minute the United States said, okay, our economy's money is dependent on what the Federal Reserve issues, and they're issuing us however much money it was initially, at interest, by definition, there was never enough cash in the economy to pay it back. You can't pay it back, okay? But the United States has to eventually put up collateral for this, which is whatever you're going to lose if you default, right? And the nation basically only has two things that it can really offer as collateral: resources or land. So what you've got is a ticking clock on the American Republic, where it's only a matter of time until the country defaults on the money it owes to the Federal Reserve, and it will have to hand over huge chunks or all of the nation to private ownership of this bank. Okay? So that's a huge problem. That's why when you have former presidential candidate Ron Paul saying we need to audit the Fed and find out what they're doing, that gets squelched real fast. Because if you were to shine a light on what the Federal Reserve does, it will become immediately apparent to everybody looking at it that this is some huge criminal enterprise that has been hoodwinking the United States into basically getting ready to hand the entire country over to private ownership since the Federal Reserve Act came into being. But how do they stave that off? Well, you stave that off with a couple of things, but the first one is you combine this idea of fiat currency, meaning money that's just issued out of thin air, with another concept called fractional reserve banking. So what does that mean? What the heck is fractional reserve banking? So, okay, Copter, you were just talking about investing in stuff. You were talking about guns and bullets, but let's say you have cash on hand, right? And you have more than you can reasonably spend on guns and bullets right now, and you need to store it someplace. If you're like most Americans, you put it into a bank, right? That way you can use a debit card in different places, and you can get issued a credit card, and you don't have to have cash on hand for every purchase you make everywhere you go. Sounds good so far. But how do banks make money, especially when if you have a savings account at a bank, they have to pay you interest on it? And the answer is they make money by loaning money out at interest higher than the interest rate they have to pay to their depositors. Okay? So let's say we're back to our simplified economy where you got $50, I got $50, and we both have a loaf of bread. You say, okay, well, I got this $50 sitting around. I want to be safe. I can't always be guarding it, every minute of my time with all my guns and bullets. So I'm going to put it in a bank so some punk doesn't come along and just look under my mattress and take my $50. So you put it in a bank, and then the bank is going to want to loan it out at interest. And the question you have to ask is, how big of a loan can the bank make when it has your $50 on deposit? So we have the First National Bank of bare bones talk, and you are its only depositor, and you've put your $50 in it. So Copter, are you still here with us to answer a question? If you are, just give me a quick shout in chat. Okay, I'm going to assume you are and hope that you actually respond. Do you think we follow the Irish Republicans' theory of the Socialist Republic, it will solve most of these issues? That is a much more complicated question that we can get to right now. And I have to say I'm not as familiar with the Irish Republicans' theory of Socialist Republic, so I would have to study up on it before I could have a useful discussion. Okay, so Copter, we're imagining that you have put your $50 into the bank. You're its only depositor. The bank has your $50 and nothing else. How much value of loans, how many dollars of loans can the bank make if the entire amount of money it has on hand is $50? Let's see if you get this one right. I almost wish I could play the Jeopardy theme, while waiting for Copter to answer this one. It's always fascinating to me to see what people guess and, how they figure this stuff out. So I'm going to wait on Copter to give an answer for just a minute. But unless he's familiar with how fractional reserve banking works, the odds are he's not going to guess the right number. If it only has 50, it can only lend 50. Great guess, wrong. Okay? This is where fractional reserve banking comes in. So the law says that in order to try to keep cash on hand in case depositors come looking for their currency, that a bank has to have some money on hand to cope with that, which is called a run on the bank. But they don't have to have all of the money available to them. Okay? They are only required to keep a reserve that is a fraction of the amount of money that's been deposited there. So let's just up the numbers we're talking about to 100 just to keep the numbers easy. Okay? So fractions are like 2/3, 1/5, 1/10. Okay? If the bank fraction that we're talking about is 1 out of 100, it can create loans as long as it has $1 real still on deposit for every 100 that it has in outstanding loans. Okay? So if you put $100 in there, and the fraction is 1/100th, they could take, for example, they could issue, for example, $1,000 worth of loans by keeping just $10 of your money on reserve as the fractional reserve. Okay? So in theory, with $100 on reserve, they can write loans, if the fraction is 1/100th, they could write $10,000 worth of loans, which is 100 reserve dollars, your deposit, times the 100 from the fraction is 10,000. And that means they can literally create money out of thin air. So they've got $100 on deposit, and they just created $10,000 more. So now there is $10,100 worth of currency, worth of value in circulation, okay? And the sick part is, if whoever it is that borrowed that $10,000 doesn't use it immediately and they say, oh my God, I've got $10,000 in my pocket, somebody might rob me, what can I do to keep this safe? I'm going to deposit it in the bank. Then that actually can count as further reserves, allowing them to make loans of up to 100 times that value. Okay? So this starts multiplying out of control. And there's actually a large and complicated formula for it that is a function called an asymptotic function, and I won't bore you to tears with all the numbers that go along with that, but what it means is there's a very, very high number that's the maximum you can generate using that recurring fraction type thing, that you can get closer and closer to but never actually exceed. And that number you can't ever actually exceed is called the asymptote, okay? The American banking system is designed to push as much currency into the economy as possible as close as it can get to that asymptote line, because the minute you hit that asymptote line, the entire economy collapses because you now have more loans outstanding than you can pay at any given moment, and there's no room left to borrow. Not giving my info. I hate how my high school only teaches capitalist economics. It's so stupid. It means most people educated by our public schools only know about capitalist economics, then they think the only thing that works is capitalism, and because they didn't learn other systems, they think those systems don't work. You are correct. Doesn't creating money devalue the already or existing money? Copter, yes. That is the primary driver of inflation. So let's go back to our simple economy where we each have 50 bucks because there's 100 in the economy, and we have one loaf of bread each. We were talking before about how if you want all the bread, then I should require you to give me your half of the money so I have all the money while you have all the goods, right? But instead of me having $100 and you having all the bread, what if some third party comes along and just hands us each another $450, so now we have 500 bucks each, and then the two loaves of bread? If you want all the loaves of bread, I still should require all the currency, all right? But because we've just dumped more currency into the market, those two loaves of bread in aggregate are now worth $1,000 because I should require all the currency if you're going to have all the goods. So by dumping money into the economy, you give people like money to spend or invest or blow on weed or whatever they're going to do with it. But it devalues every dollar within the economy at the same time because you now have what's called more currency chasing the same amount of goods. Okay? So, and I'm sorry, if this is news to you, I am very sorry that your educational system has failed you, but this is the kind of stuff you only start to learn when you get to collegiate level economics classes, and that's a shame, as not giving my info is suggesting, because high school really should be teaching this stuff. Not giving my info, yes, exactly. They are giving money to people knowing that they literally have basically two choices. Stuff it under a mattress where it's vulnerable to burglary, or stick it right back in the bank. This is exactly why I invest my money into physical objects that hold value. That is not a bad idea, but guns and bullets are not investments. They're bullets particularly because they're what's called an expendable asset. Once you have used a bullet, it no longer has any value except for the brass that you could melt down, for example, or if you, because you don't automatically get powder to reload it with and another wad and another bullet and the sealant and all that stuff that comes into, a fresh blasting cap. You don't automatically receive those when you consume a bullet. So when you're buying bullets, you're not actually investing because they are expendable. If they're ever used, they lose 100%. Well, not 100%, but almost 100% of their value because they're only worth the brass at that point. But yes, not giving my info. So what you're saying is let banks do that. Yes, that's exactly what banks are there to do, because the more of this phantom money or fiat money they put into circulation, the more money they're going to make because they can charge interest on the phantom money, just like they were charging it on the original deposit. Right? So it's basically a giant Ponzi scheme. Well, not basically, it is a giant Ponzi scheme. That's exactly how you should describe it. So how did this relate to capitalism? Capitalism is about making the rich richer and letting them keep themselves that way, and because the amount of money in an economy eventually reaches that asymptote line and there is no longer any way to inject money into the economy, they want as large of a percentage of that money as they can get, because once you reach the cap where you cannot put any more money into the economy, you can't dilute the value of those dollars by injecting more cash, right? So the greater the percentage of that money they have, the richer they become. And the more securely rich they become, because money translates into power. Okay, it allows them to influence things, it allows them to buy cooperation from people. It allows them to have control over workers by holding their future, their survival, their ability to buy food and pay for water bills and all the things that keep them alive. It gives them a stranglehold on all that stuff. So to talk to, not giving my info briefly, one of the problems with capitalist economic teaching is that it teaches that capitalism works, but when you say capitalism works, all that means is it means the rich are staying rich and the poor are staying poor. That is literally the definition of capitalism working. It's not about free and fair economics, it's about keeping the rich rich. So when you say capitalism is working, all that means is the rich are being successful at keeping everybody else poor while they maintain or increase their wealth. Bullets also have a pretty good trade value. It's just an item these days that's always in demand. Possibly, yes. But I'm not sure we're ever going to switch the American economy to the bullet standard instead of like the gold standard or anything else. So continuing on how this relates to capitalism, it gives capitalists a hugely powerful tool for extracting wealth from everybody else. And one of the things you'll hear from the right wing a lot is they will whine and gripe and piss and moan and bitch and complain about wealth transfer. And when they talk about that, what they're talking about is social programs where they might have to pay some income tax so that, like, I don't know, a poor kid does not die of starvation in a freezing cold, unheated apartment because, you know, the capitalist is rich and they're not. But what they never seem to mention is every business transaction is wealth transfer. As soon as two people engage in trade, somebody's getting richer in exchange for goods or services. It's all wealth transfer. And rich people have no problem with wealth transfer that benefits them. They just want to characterize those words as, oh, poor people are greedy, blah, 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 while ignoring the fact that the greediest people on the planet are the friggin' rich. Okay? I mean, let's be honest for a second. How many friggin' 300-meter long yachts does one person actually need, or can they actually use, you know? But that doesn't stop them from accumulating them. So how does that relate to what we have on the screen? We're now at the point where we can start looking at the little chart that I've got up there, because rich people love to bitch about income transfer when they're talking about taxation. And if you take a look, the portion of U.S. income made up by the top 1% since 1913, which is when the income tax was instituted in this country, we did not always have one, you can see that the rich they always make a huge amount. If you take a look at it, having 10% of the entirety of the U.S. income made up by the top 1% is still an enormous, advantage to the rich. Because if it were proportional, right, the top 1% of income, it would be made up by 1% of the people, and the second percentile would be made up by the second percentile of people. But when you have 1% of the people having a portion of the income that's 10 times the fraction that they comprise the economy of, that's a whole other deal. That's income inequality. And where you see that dip in this chart starts basically, if you take a look at it, right at the end of the Great Depression, when Roosevelt did what got rich people to call him a class traitor, because he was rich, and he decided to stick it to the rich and help the average citizen by implementing things like Social Security and by raising taxes on the rich. And those taxes went up and up and up, and they are what dragged us out of the Great Depression, along with the economic boom that came from having a world war, where the American manufacturing base pretty much exploded in size and power. And you will find that led directly to the golden age of the United States economy, where one guy working a menial job like a warehouse worker could buy a house, buy 2 cars, support himself, a wife, and 3 kids, and put all of his kids through college with no debt. And everything was cheaper, inflation wasn't out of control. That was because everybody, even the rich, had to kick in a reasonable share, and that kept the economy going. Where you start seeing that tank starts around 1980. And what happened in 1980? Reagan. Reagan basically started to undo everything that Delano Roosevelt had accomplished, and he stuck it to unions, he stuck it to the public, he dropped taxes on the rich, he increased taxes on everybody else. It was just a complete nightmare, and that has let the rich start grabbing more and more of the money again, right back to like the Gilded Age, when robber barons were the rule, not the exception. And we're still in that circumstance today. But oh no, my money, which I got from stealing surplus value, is going to help those less fortunate that need to work hard so they can get rich like my great-granddaddy did 100 years ago. I agree with everything about that except that their great-granddaddy didn't work hard 100 years ago. He ripped people off 100 years ago. You know? Yeah, Reagan and Thatcher weren't so great. So this is how, we end up with income inequality, is by the rich influencing economic policy to benefit themselves at the expense of everybody else. So what I'm going to do is I want to show you an interesting video, which we're going to have to switch screens here for just a second. Let me see if I got this queued up right. All right, so here we go. Let's tell me if you can hear this okay. If you can't, I will adjust the volume.
Can't get out of my head.
Okay, here we go.
Art I saw recently that I can't get out of my head. A Harvard business professor and economist asked more than 5,000 Americans how they thought wealth was distributed in the United States. This is what they said they thought it was. Dividing the country into 5 rough groups of the top, bottom, and middle 3 20% groups, they asked people how they thought the wealth in this country was divided. Then he asked them what they thought was the ideal distribution. And 92%, that's at least 9 out of 10 of them, said it should be more like this. In other words, more equitable than they think it is. Now that fact is telling, admittedly, the notion that most Americans know that the system is already skewed unfairly. But what's most interesting to me is the reality compared to our perception. The ideal is as far removed from our perception of reality as the actual distribution is from what we think exists in this country. So ignore the ideal for a moment. Here's what we think it is again. And here is the actual distribution. Shockingly skewed. Not only do the bottom 20% and the next 20%, the bottom 40% of Americans barely have any of the wealth. I mean, it's hard to even see them on the chart. But the top 1% has more of the country's wealth than 9 out of 10 Americans believe the entire top 20% should have. Mind-blowing. But let's look at it another way, because I find this chart kind of difficult to wrap my head around. Instead, let's reduce the 311 million Americans to just a representative 100 people. Make it simple. Here they are: teachers, coaches, firefighters, construction workers, engineers, doctors, lawyers, some investment bankers, a CEO, maybe a celebrity or two. Now let's line them up according to their wealth. Poorest people on the left, wealthiest on the right, just a steady row of folks based on their net worth. We'll color code them like we did before based on which 20% quintile they fall into. Now let's reduce the total wealth of the United States, which was roughly $54 trillion in 2009, to this symbolic pile of cash. And let's distribute it among our 100 Americans. Well, here's socialism, all the wealth of the country distributed equally. We all know that won't work. We need to encourage people to work and work hard to achieve that good old American dream and keep our country moving forward. So, here's that ideal we asked everyone about. Something like this curve. This isn't too bad. We've got some incentive, as the wealthiest folks are now about 10 to 20 times better off than the poorest Americans. But hey, even the poor folks aren't actually poor, since the poverty line has stayed almost entirely off the chart. We have a super healthy middle class with a smooth transition into wealth. And yes, Republicans and Democrats alike chose this curve. 9 out of 10 people, 92%, said this was a nice, ideal distribution of America's wealth. But let's move on. This is what people think America's wealth distribution actually looks like. Not as equitable, clearly, but for me, even this still looks pretty great. Yes, the poorest 20 to 30% are starting to suffer quite a lot compared to the ideal, and the middle class is certainly struggling more than they were, while the rich and wealthy are making roughly 100 times that of the poorest Americans, and about 10 times that of the still healthy middle class. Sadly, this isn't even close to the reality. Here is the actual distribution of wealth in America. The poorest Americans don't even register. They're down to pocket change. And the middle class is barely distinguishable from the poor. In fact, even the rich between the top 10 and 20 percentile are worse off. Only the top 10% are better off. And how much better off? So much better off that the top 2 to 5% are actually off the chart at this scale. And the top 1%, this guy, well, his stack of money stretches 10 times higher than we can show. Here's his stack of cash, restacked, all by itself. This is the top 1% we've been hearing so much about. So much green in his pockets that I have to give him a whole new column of his own, because he won't fit on my chart. 1% of America has 40% of all the nation's wealth. The bottom 80%, 8 out of every 10 people, or 80 out of these 100, only has 7% between them. And this has only gotten worse in the last 20 to 30 years. While the richest 1% take home almost a quarter of the national income today, in 1976, they took home only 9%, meaning their share of income has nearly tripled in the last 30 years. The top 1% own half the country's stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. The bottom 50% of Americans own only 0.5% of these investments, which means they aren't investing. They're just scraping by. I'm sure many of these wealthy people have worked very hard for their money, but do you really believe that the CEO is working 380 times harder than his average employee?
Okay, so I want to pause it there. This usually blows the mind of everybody I introduce it to. I'm curious to know your reactions to this as you have seen so far, to this information. Copter, or not giving my info, any opinion? I've been slowly working on a smoothie while we're watching this. What always surprises me about this video is just how different the economic reality of wealth inequality is compared to what the average American thinks it is. Yeah, not giving my info, that's exactly my point. Most people, like this guy talked about, they think it's bad, you know. They have an idea of what they would like to see. And they're aware that it's not even remotely like that. But almost nobody understands just how severely out of whack this is. I mean, it's bonkers. Like, off the chain, out of whack. Let's continue.
Not his lowest paid employee, not the janitor, but the average earner in his company. The average worker needs to work more than a month to earn what the CEO makes in 1 hour. We certainly don't have to go all the way to socialism to find something that is fair for hardworking Americans. We don't even have to achieve what most of us consider might be ideal. All we need to do is wake up and realize that the reality in this country is not at all what we think it is.
So yeah, that's pretty insane stuff right there, huh? Drop the nukes already. So, one of the big names in communist philosophy, I think it was Lenin, actually said that the really crazy part about capitalism isn't even the harm that it causes everybody. It's that it sows the seeds of its own destruction. Because if the rich continue the way they are, basically looting the entire national economy, and they leave everybody, even the most hardcore Republican right-winger, starving to death in their own house, watching their children die because they can't eat, watching them die of dysentery because they can't get clean water. Those people who are like Copter, who have invested in guns and bullets, as they said, are going to come for them and kill them. They're not just going to sit by while their children are dying. They're going to take it out on the people that caused the problem. And this is what is actually the cause of the French Revolution, if you recall. It was the poor against the rich. And the French have never forgotten those lessons. Americans have a very short memory for the abuses they suffer and who causes them. But the French have not forgotten. That's why if you take a look in the news today, literally today, there's some kind of nearly nationwide strike going on in France. Because if there's one thing they have learned, it's they are never going to take any shit from the rich again. Ever. Never, ever. No, and you certainly don't make as much as the people you work for. Let me see if I can find something about that French strike. Topics. Where is it? International news, maybe? No. Where is it? Hang on. French strike. Let's see if I can just Google it. Yeah, so pension strike brings travel chaos for second day in France. France on strike, traffic jams, police brutality, questionable cartoons. So let's take a look at one of these articles here. Hold on, let's go back to the reactions here. Second day of a strike over French President Macron's planned pension reforms has disrupted services across the country. So basically, they're thinking about making people retire later or get reduced money from their version of Social Security retirement benefits, right? Oh, my dog hears somebody. It might be my wife coming home. But unlike the United States, if a particular segment of the economy gets messed with, everybody goes on strike. So they basically shut down all public transportation there because all the bus drivers and train drivers and traffic control people, they're all saying, screw you, we're not working, you're trying to screw people so you can suck it. Whereas the United States, we don't do that. Again, going back to Reagan actually broke the power of unions in this country during the air traffic controllers strike in the 80s. He literally, by executive order, ordered the air traffic controllers back to work or told them they would all lose their jobs and be imprisoned. I still make the least out of the guys I work with. The team leader, I guess, is what you would call him, makes double what we make and do the same job with the same amount of work. Yeah. Welcome to capitalism. Where hard work is not what's rewarded, nepotism runs rampant, the whole system is screwed and it's designed to fuck everybody who's not at the top. But yeah, so French workers are on a nationwide strike. Let's see if we can get some pictures of this. So, in the United States, you hear about some group getting the short end of the stick, and most people kind of go, yeah, okay, whatever. This is what it looks like in France when that happens. Okay? The whole country rises up and says, no fucking way, dude. So, and this is why the French have free everything. They don't have to pay for college, they don't have to pay for healthcare. If you have a kid, you get a live-in nanny for a frickin' year from the government if you want one. They have maternity leave, paternity leave, social benefits we can't even imagine here. And that's because, as a whole, they will not accept it when bigwigs, rich people, government agencies, whatever, try to screw them. Because they stand united. This is a country with a history of literally chopping the heads off of the people that try to stick it to the general public. And I am not suggesting we should start breaking out the guillotines, but a level of mutual support amongst the working class, similar to what France does, where, one segment of the country getting the short end of the stick means everybody goes on strike and says no fucking way, would probably go a long way toward helping with problems in this country. I'm just saying. So, yeah, this is how income inequality works, and this is, it's sort of interesting to see how other nations react to having their economic well-being screwed with. The United States is not all that big on, mutual support of each other. We've been convinced that our own fellow citizens are the enemy, at least significantly among the right wing. There's a huge amount of effort on the part of the rich and the powerful in this country to use the divide and conquer strategy. They keep citizens fighting amongst themselves instead of letting us organize on our own behalf. Copter says, a strike with my job would affect a whole lot more than just our nation. I'm not sure exactly how, but you can feel free to explain how that would impact things. But the thing is, what a lot of people fail to realize, particularly the working class, is that in the long run, if we choose to take it, we actually have the power, okay? You look at your average billionaire, and they're lucky if they know how to tie their own fucking shoes without help. They don't buy their own food. They don't pay their own bills. If all the people who facilitate the lives of the super rich just took the week off, most of these people would friggin' starve the entire week because they don't know how to buy a gallon of milk or prepare a meal or wash their own clothes or buy shampoo or soap. It's crazy. But they pay other people to manage this stuff for them, and in the end, we are the ones who enable them to do this stuff. And they get us to enable them by making it advantageous to us to stick it to our fellow man. They keep us at each other's throats. They keep the public fighting over stupid things like LGBT rights when, no gay, let's say you don't agree with gay marriage, just hypothetically. Let's say you're an anti-gay bigot or whatever, and you don't like the idea of gay people getting married. The fact is, no gay couple getting married is going to screw you out of your Social Security benefits. That's not going to have any impact on that. It's not going to keep you from getting a raise at your job. It's not going to change the interest rates in this country. It's not going to change the inflation rate. It has nothing to do with the things that actually affect your life in a positive or negative way. We argue about who gets to go to college because it's expensive. We exclude people from being able to get ahead. We, scrabble and claw against each other and are taught to engage in something I mentioned, I think it was 2 streams ago, called crab bucket thinking. Their workers are too desperate for money, they can't afford to. Well, that's the thing, is when you keep people poor and desperate, they're less likely to resist because they're literally, it's to the advantage of the rich to create the situation, by the way. They're like a paycheck away from homelessness, right? And when you keep people in that circumstance, they don't want to rock the boat because they're terrified. If you were to remove all the student loan debt from all the people in this country, and make it free to go to college, and remove all the medical debt and make it free to get medical care. You have to pay a little more in income taxes, but less than, and this is the part that's the big lie about this, it would cost you less in income tax than what people are paying for actual insurance premiums to get universal health care in this country. But if you remove all those levers that the rich use to keep people terrified of losing their job or rocking the boat, people would be able to stand up for themselves more. And the rich don't want that. George Carlin actually had a great comedy routine about that. Let me see if I can find that. Hang on a second. Let's see if we can find the George Carlin thing. O-R-G-E, Carlin. Let's see. This might be it. Is this it?
Americans love...
Okay, here we go. Let's watch this and react to that. George Carlin, Dead guy, famous comedian, extremely funny, extremely intelligent, and very much on the side of the average American.
Americans love them all. They love them all. That's where they get to satisfy their two most prominent addictions at the same time: shopping and eating. Millions of semi-conscious Americans, day after day, shuffling through the malls, shopping and eating, especially eating. Americans love to eat. They are fatally attracted to the slow death of fast food. Hot dogs, corn dogs, triple bacon cheeseburgers, deep fried butter dipped in pork fat and cheese whiz, mayonnaise soaked barbecued mozzarella patty melts. Americans will eat anything, anything, anything. If you were selling sauteed raccoons' assholes on a stick,
Sauteed raccoons.
Americans would buy them and eat them, especially if you dipped them in butter and put a little salsa on them. This country is big time, pig time. Forget the bald eagle. You know what the national emblem of this country ought to be? A big bowl of macaroni and cheese. A big bowl, because everything in this country is king size. King size, extra large, and super jumbo, especially the fucking people. Have you seen some of the people in this country? Have you taken a good look at some of these big fat motherfuckers walking around? Big fat motherfuckers.
I confess, I'm one of them.
Oh my God. Huge piles of redundant protoplasm lumbering through the malls like a fleet of interstate buses. The people in this country are immense, massive bellies, monstrous thighs, and big fat fucking asses. And if you stand there for a minute and you look at one of them, you begin to wonder, how does this woman take a shit? How does she shit? And even more frightening, how does she wipe her ass? Can she even locate her asshole? She must require assistance. Are paramedics trained in this field? And standing right next to her, of course, with a plate full of nachos and a mouthful of pie, is her clueless fucking husband, Joe Sixpack. With his monstrous swollen beer belly hanging dangerously out over his belt buckle, this guy ain't seen his dick since the Nixon administration. And if you stand there and you look at the two of them, you begin to wonder to yourself, do these people fuck? Is this man actually capable of fucking this woman? It doesn't seem structurally possible that these two people could achieve penetration. Maybe they're in that Cirque du Soleil or something. I'm telling you, the people in this willfully ignorant of the big red, white, and blue dick that's being jammed up their assholes every day. Because the owners of this country know the truth. It's called the American dream, because you have to be asleep to believe it. But say what you want about American folks. Yeah. You can...
Truer words are rarely spoken than that bit from George Carlin. Yep, so yeah, I have to say, he helped me along that same path. I'm not going to kid you about that. Carlin had a talent for making points about economic and financial reality, political reality, that we don't see very often anymore. And that's too goddamn bad, honestly, because he was a friggin' genius. I am not even kidding. He was brilliant. Why is my camera all fucked up? It's like leaning me all over the goddamn place. What the hell? Fix it! Okay. Well, that's as good as I'm getting. So it's frustrating because when he talks about good, hardworking Americans, what he was really referring to is the average Republican American. Because Republicans, by their nature, aren't evil just by being Republicans. They get up, they go to their jobs, they work hard, they're good to their families as much as anybody else are, but they've been convinced of this ideology that the Republican mindset is somehow, good and noble and better, and that the liberal mindset where you side with the average citizen is somehow bad and horrible. And that's just a really frickin' bad circumstance. And they forget, or they're willfully ignorant, as he put it, of the fact that it's the right wing that's shafting them. Like, you talk to your average Republican, you say, what do you think about social safety net programs? They go, oh, fuck that, blah, 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 defund it, blah, blah, blah. But if you look at the maps of where this stuff is actually used, it's almost always in massively Republican population centers where the biggest users of, like, food stamps and social benefits and such, are living. It's Republicans using it more than anybody else. And they're convinced to, like, hate the very thing that keeps food on their kids' table, And they're convinced that somehow everybody else is bad. And some of the shit they say, that they've been taught to say, is so insanely frustrating. Like the one of the ones that makes me bonkers right now is when they bitch about fake news. Like, there's actually some kind of conspiracy where every news agency on the planet is in league to lie to them, but a couple of plucky billionaires are going to tell them the truth. Like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like, how do you not get that that's a lie? But they've been sold on it, Anything that doesn't, mimic their right-wing ideology is immediately labeled as fake news. They just can't see past it, which is bonkers. Or when they say, oh, those immigrants came to take our jobs. An immigrant can't just show up at your place of business and hold a gun to your employer's head and make them fire you so they can take the job. If there's somebody who you don't think should have your job having your job, it's because your employer decided to fuck you and give your job to somebody else. It's your employer. It's the rich. It's the influential. It's those people who boned you out of your job. It's not the immigrant who's trying to feed his kids. He's just another, poor person trying to get by. Or she is just another poor person trying to get by. But when it comes to who took your job, it's your boss who took your job and handed it to somebody else, not the person who came applying for it. Because if there was no help wanted sign out there, the person wouldn't be showing up with an application. Your boss has to be, the one who screws you out of your job. That's how it works. So the right wing just is willfully ignorant of these simple realities, and they've been taught to blame everybody. People who don't have white skin, who don't speak English as a first language, who aren't Protestant, Christian, evangelical, whatevers. Whatever the dividing line that they can come up with is, they keep telling people anyone on the other side of that dividing line is horrible, is evil, blah, blah, blah. And that's just a nightmare, of stupidity. There's no other word for it. It's dumb. So I didn't mean to go off on that tangent today, but okay, so here we are. You know? Let's see, what time is it? 5 o'clock? Okay. Yeah, so we got some more time here. I was, okay, so one of the things, if you scroll down and you look at my panels, you'll find out is that I'm an atheist, okay? And I make no apology for that. Woo, woo, look at me, bopping back and forth here. I make no apology for that at all. Never have, never will, not gonna. It's who I am. It's, you know, it's my worldview. But I was watching a video on YouTube, and it had, like, trailers for upcoming movies that are going to come out in the next, like, year or so. And some evangelical Christian guy decided to start talking about how, oh, you know, what the hell is going on my camera? How the one of the trailers was, God, it's making me look like I got a broken neck. What the fuck? Was hurting people of faith and encouraging false prophecy. And I responded to that. I said, as if you have real prophecy. You know, like, how do you get pissy about false prophecy when prophecy is all bullshit? There's no such thing as prophecy. People don't read each other's minds. Aliens do not mutilate cows and then abduct the farmers and anal probe them. There's no Bigfoot. There's no Loch Ness Monster. The world is not flat. Vaccines do not cause autism, and nobody can predict the future. There's no such fucking thing as prophecy, right? Cademan, I'm talking about a guy I ran into today on YouTube. We've been talking about income inequality and economics for like the past hour, and we just kind of tangented off of that. Right now, what we're talking about is some stupid shit I've heard lately on the internet. But yeah, this one person just insisted that he had the lock-on prophecy, and, you know, like, everything that he thought was prophetic was coming true and everything, and it's like, you gotta be shitting me, dude. You know? But, you know, some people just really have their strange worldviews. But yeah, so Cademan, for what we were talking about earlier, was income inequality, what causes it, how severe it is, the fact that it's a lot more severe than most people realize, how the economy basically works at a foundational level, you know, what the Federal Reserve Act was, what fiat currency is, what fractional reserve banking is, and how all that conspires to, or combines to, create a circumstance where there's money owed that cannot be repaid, that kind of thing. And was there some aspect of income inequality that you wanted to talk about or have an opinion on, Cademan? Because I'm always open to hearing ideas from viewers. I'll give you a few to respond to that, since there's always a stream delay. And I don't know, you know, if you're typing, what you're typing, whatever. And we also watched a little bit from George Carlin where he talks about how, you know, the system is basically rigged in favor of the already wealthy and powerful, and that there are huge barriers in front of everybody else. Although Carlin is much funnier when he talks about it than I'll ever be. Sorry, just turning my head to check the clock. Well, trying to figure out what to write about on this issue. Okay, are you writing for academic reasons, personal reasons? Like, why are you writing, and what is your reason for doing it? And maybe we can help you with some ideas here. And what's your perspective? Are you generally a liberal thinker, generally a conservative thinker? You know, because that may color how you want to present things. And I'm not going to, you know, bash you if you say you're conservative. I may not agree with you on certain aspects of this issue, but I'm not going to be a dick to you over it. You know, I'm decidedly liberal myself. And I will avoid being a dick to you if you avoid being a dick to me, to any conservatives here, you know. Also, welcome. I'm not sure I've seen you around the stream before. This is a fairly new stream. I've been streaming on Twitch for like 2.5 years, doing gaming stuff on a different channel, and I wanted to do some political talk because I've worked in the political op-ed and reporting industry during like the 2011 to 2013 era, and I miss being involved in that, but I didn't want it to contaminate my gaming stream, so I created this one. Well, about liberal and conservative, I believe we all have both sides in us. There's probably... hold on. Let's allow. Boop. There may be, to some extent, but it's been my experience that most people are strongly on one side of that spectrum or the other. But, whatever yours is, give us some idea why you're writing or want to write about this, and we can try and help you find a topic, because there are a bunch of them that you could explore from either one of those philosophical positions. And to do, like, if you're going to talk economic theory in general, if you're conservative, you might talk about supply side economic theory, and if you're liberal, you might talk about demand side economic theory. Because those two tend to be strongly linked to certain political ideologies and ways of perceiving the economy. And, one of them is more demonstrably, happening in certain countries than others and that kind of thing. In many issues, I have a general right-wing view on things, and others I'm more liberal. Well, let's talk about the economic one. You're thinking about doing some writing, so tell us a little about that, and we'll help you pick a topic. And if you want to come back here at some point and discuss it, you are always welcome. I used to have a gaming YouTube channel where I ranted about politics while playing. Most gamers are conservative, though. I've found that depends on the game. I play a lot of war games, war simulation type stuff, tank games, that sort of thing, and there are a lot of conservatives in that, and that's okay. I don't have any issue with that, as long as somebody doesn't start screaming at me for not being conservative. You play games where there's less violence in them, like farm simulators and such, or things where you're playing, what do they call them, voxel building games, like Minecraft or Creativerse or anything like that. More construction-related stuff tends to have more left-leaning thinkers. It's just the nature of the beast. People of certain ideologies tend to gravitate towards certain kinds of games. Man. So yeah, Caedmon, still waiting for you to tell us a little bit about what your writing project is going to entail, and then I'm sure we can think of some interesting ideas, topics, approaches for you. So share that, and we'll help you out. Since we mentioned supply side and demand side economics, though, that actually plays into the whole concept of income inequality. So the economic principle generally favored by the rich is called supply side economics, which under the Reagan era gained the two other nicknames, one of which is trickle down economics, and the other is voodoo economics. Voodoo economics is a nickname given to it because it's like black magic, and it doesn't work and it's harmful. And trickle down was about the idea that if you give the rich a lot of money, they will reinvest it and it will flow downhill to everybody else. About economics, I believe people should have the right to earn enough not only to survive but also live. When it comes to American minimum wage, it should always follow a country's and society's living expenses at any given time. So when rent is rising, food became more expensive, minimum wage should always fall suit to that. So it sounds like what you're talking about is the living wage concept, and I happen to think a living wage is a hugely important topic right now, and we can talk a little bit about that. So let's talk about what a living wage is. Caedmon was touching on a whole bunch of factors about it. The real short version of a living wage is that jobs should pay enough that on a single income, a person can always meet their necessities for housing, clothing, food, medical care, all the stuff that's necessary to get by. And that's different than a subsistence income, which is enough to barely scratch out a living. A living wage is enough to give you a comfortable, reasonable life, not a poverty-stricken, barely getting by life. Okay? And you'll hear two different approaches to that. The first one is, oh my God, no, we can't just raise the minimum wage, blah, 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 it'll destroy the economy. And the other one is, yes, you can raise the minimum wage and it will not destroy the economy. And the people who say that you can have a living wage as the minimum wage and it won't destroy the economy are correct, and we know that for a fact because we've had that circumstance in this country before. And we talked about it maybe half an hour ago. So looking at the chart that's currently on the screen, where you can see the portion of U.S. income made by the top 1%, etc., and how it dips down till the New Deal was put into place and the wartime economy boom, and then the taxation of the rich that happened following World War II and lasting up until the Reagan era, where we called it the golden age of American society. that was the period of time in this country where everybody earned a living wage. Okay, you could have, as we were talking about earlier, a single wage earner, right? Usually the man in a household where you would have like a husband, wife, and some kids, whose single income doing something like working in a warehouse loading pallets, not like even skilled labor, but just average, labor work, was enough for him to pay for his own needs, his wife's needs, 3 kids, a house, 2 cars, all the medical care, and put his kids through college without them incurring any debt. So it is absolutely possible to have that happen, and that was the time in which the middle class in this country was at its biggest, at its most, economically healthy, when people did not go bankrupt because they had an extra doctor's appointment. Like even, extreme medical care was something that a reasonable person's salary would accommodate. And it was only when we went back to funneling all the nation's wealth into the hands of the already rich that stopped working. Okay? So anyone who tells you that we can't have a living wage is simply forgetting that from like 1945 till about 1978, we had a living wage in this country. You just didn't have to artificially create it. It just happened to be the natural state of the economy. It was unthinkable in like the 1950s for somebody to try to fuck their workers so hard, that they couldn't survive on less than 120 hours a week of full-time jobs. Nobody would even have suggested that. Any employer in your town who tried to do that would have gone out of business in a heartbeat because you wouldn't have been able to get anybody to work for them because it just wasn't necessary. And there are a bunch of advantages to the idea of having a living wage. And this goes back to what we talked about earlier. We just touched on it. I'm going to go into it a little further. This thing called crab bucket thinking, or the crab bucket mentality. So what is the crab bucket mentality? It comes from a behavior that crab fishermen have seen for a long time. You catch your first crab, you throw them in a bucket, and you lower the trap back into the water, right? You have a crab in a bucket trying to get out of the bucket. It's an artificial containment. The crab doesn't like it, wants to leave, wants to better his circumstance. He tries to get out. Can't do it, though. The bucket is too tall. You put 10 crabs in the bucket, and they're all pissed about it. They don't want to be stuck in the bucket. They all want to leave. But if one of them climbs up the edge of the bucket and is getting close to the top, instead of lifting him up and helping him get over the lip so that he can like reach down and start pulling the rest of them out, they reach up and they grab him by the legs and yank him back down into the bucket with him. They would rather, because crabs have a brain that's like the size of the head of a pin, they would rather drag everybody down into shit than help one person out to get better, knowing that person could help them in return. Like they don't have that mentality. That's how crabs think. And the American public is being taught to think that way. And you can see it very easily when people are talking about the minimum wage being raised to a living wage every time somebody objects to it. And the objection you'll hear, and I promise you, if you talk to people about that, you will hear some variation of this every single time. It's, well, I make $15 an hour. Why should some guy flipping burgers get the same amount of money that I do when I'm doing something much harder and, more skilled? And what they're missing is that's the wrong question. The question isn't why should the guy making, minimum wage right now not be earning $15 an hour? The question is, why is somebody earning $15 an hour now not earning 30? So if you were to raise the minimum wage to a living wage, let's just call it $15 an hour because that's a number that's been thrown around, right? What happens is everybody knows that no matter where they work, they can get paid at least $15 an hour. So let's say, for the sake of argument, that one job you could get is working as a security guard in some, empty facility that only has a guard there for insurance purposes, because I've actually been that guy when I was like 19. And you show up, you clock in, you literally sleep all night because nothing happens there. Nobody robs an empty warehouse because there's nothing there to steal. And you wake up in the morning and you go home and you get paid, right? So let's say that's one job you can get, and that pays $15 an hour. And, then that only pays $15 an hour because a new minimum wage law has been implemented. Copter, you may be correct, but we're just talking example here. somebody who currently earns $15 an hour, like one person that is the example you see bandied about on the internet, which is probably a made-up story, but even if it's true, is an ambulance worker who says, well, I get paid $15 an hour. Why should that schmuck who, sleeps all night at the security job get paid $15 an hour when I'm out there saving lives? And the answer is, it's not about you getting paid $15. It's about you getting paid $30, because as an ambulance worker, if a guy who gets to sleep all night gets paid $15 an hour, if literally any job you get will pay at least $15 an hour, then you are empowered to turn around and say to your boss, you need to be paying me $30 an hour, because if you don't, I'm just going to go work someplace where I can sleep all night and get paid the same amount, that you're paying me now, and not have the stress of all this, so you need to do better. And it will rise, it'll lift the entire wage spectrum. So what we need to do is get past the crab bucket thinking, where the person currently earning $15 an hour is like, oh, fuck those guys, they shouldn't earn $15 an hour because they're flipping burgers, and start thinking, I'm a burger flipper who's now earning $15 an hour. How can I, by doing that, help support an economy where the people who are, working more skilled jobs also have an increase in their wages, and be uplifting instead of crab bucket. So there are other reasons why that's beneficial, and it's not just about the actual wage. It then goes back to working conditions, because a lot of people have jobs where they have to work incredibly dangerous stuff, like Copter does, but not just in jobs like that. In manufacturing, in warehouses, whatever, where the working conditions are trash. They have to put up with a bunch of shit, because if they don't, they're going to lose that $15 an hour job, and then they're going to have to go work minimum wage for $7.50, and they're going to lose their house, and their kids are going to starve, and whatever. Mine workers, good example, Cademan. Employers won't be able to just do that anymore. They will have to treat their employees better, because they'll know that nobody has to put up with their shit anymore, because they can literally go anywhere and take any job and be guaranteed to earn enough that they can survive comfortably. They don't have to feel like they've got their arm twisted behind their back to keep putting up with a bunch of shit from an employer, with a dangerous circumstance, with an abusive boss, with any of that stuff, because there will literally be no job that they can't get, that will not pay them enough money that they can survive, that they can get by, they can pay their rent, they can feed their family. The problem is, if everyone employs that their employers equal bad, won't be able to happen, because with the living wage mentality also comes adequate social safety nets, which means that if somebody can't work, or if they are, let's say, fired for not being willing to work 30 hours straight in a coal mine and risk their lives every day, that the social safety nets will also provide adequate income for them, so they won't have to suffer. So this all comes as part of a package deal. When you take care of the working class, it benefits all of them. It's the effect spreads throughout the entire working economy, and that's again why we have to stop thinking crab bucket and start thinking mutual support like they do in France. Because you can't go wrong by doing this. And what eventually is going to happen if we do that is the rich will adopt a different mindset, because they'll have to. And going back to that video I showed earlier, where they had what Americans would like to see as wealth distribution, what it is, what they think it is now, and what it actually is, those curves will start to be compressed downward toward where people want the economy to look like, because the rich will still be rich in that circumstance. Even in the 50s, when the highest marginal tax rates were in the high 90%, rich people still had yachts. Rich people still had mansions. Rich people still had households full of servants. They didn't have to lift a finger to clean their own homes. They had all the accoutrements, all the the neat stuff that goes along with being rich. The effect of strengthening the middle class means they will have to go back to being reasonable about being rich. Maybe their yacht is 100 feet long instead of 500 feet long. Maybe they only have 10 houses around the world instead of 50. There's this excess that the rich have that is detrimental to everybody's well-being, including their own long-term, because eventually if you render the whole world in poverty, then you have the French Revolution. Which, ask anybody who was rich during the French Revolution if they wish they had been a little bit different in their attitudes right up to the point where somebody pulled the lever on that guillotine, and they would have probably said, yeah, this is probably a big mistake on my part to be that much of a rich asshat. So what we're looking for here is not, destroy the rich, and we're not looking for impose absolute socialism. What we're looking for is require fairness, require income distribution that is reasonable, that does not leave anybody starving, which does not leave anybody without clean water, without health care, without access to an education. Because we literally have seen the entire 4-decade span of 1940 to 1980 where we had that and it worked, and it was the strongest the American economy has ever been, ever. Okay, so we know that it works. We absolutely know it works because we've done it. And the only reason we're not doing it now is because the people in that top 1% are not allowing it. They're intentionally fighting against it, using their wealth and power and influence to prevent it from happening. And to give you another answer to Caedmon, to your question about what if every employer treats their employees equally bad, what you would have to understand is that employers won't do that when they realize that if they do, their employees can leave because the employers still want to make their money. They still want the financial success that comes from operating a functioning and profitable business. And you can't do that and treat your employees like dirt in an economy where your employees don't have to take your shit. So their love of money will actually make them stop being assholes, because they won't be able to make the money if they keep treating people like dirt. They will literally realize that they will impoverish themselves if they don't straighten up and fly right. So I know this is maybe a little bit shorter of a stream, but I promised my wife that I would make her homemade mac and cheese tonight, and I would like to be able to get to work starting in on that. I'm looking for ideas for interesting topics for next week's news streams. So if anybody wants to send some PMs to me, that would be great. Let me know what you think about it, what you like about the show, what you don't like, ideas for next week, and I would love to consider some of them. Let's see, Caedmon says, trying to think one step further, if people start to not believe the thing about start working your way up simply aren't possible anymore, what happens then? I'm not sure I understand the question, Caedmon. If you want to try expressing it again, and I will try to answer it before I wrap up. A guy from your high school got in the newspaper. Do I want to know how he got in the newspaper? Or is this just going to bum me out for the rest of the night? Oh, great. So he 3D printed a gun. Fantastic. Hey, Glaring Husky, you you are arriving right as we're thinking about getting the stream wrapped up. But welcome. I have not left already, Caedmon. I am still here. I'm trying to find out what people want to talk about next week and giving folks a chance to get in the last word. Unless somebody's being a total jerk, I don't mind somebody else getting the last word in on the stream. So, other than me thanking everybody for being here. If it weren't for capitalism, you wouldn't be able to make money streaming. Not true. The entire existence of the internet does not come from capitalism. It comes from socialism, because the internet was an invention of DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, which is funded by tax dollars, not by anything from a for-profit entity. So the entire foundation of the platform upon which we are currently communicating came from public funds and public research through a government agency. So the idea that if it weren't for capitalism you wouldn't be able to do this, that is simply incorrect. It is also incorrect to say that there is no way that something other than capitalism could come up with these ideas, because again, the internet exists because of something other than capitalism. Just dropped the nukes already. This from a guy who was talking about, what was it, nuclear woodchuck rocket launchers or something? That was a funny conversation, Copter. Well, I mean, Husky, do you dispute the fact that the internet was created by DARPA? Because you can absolutely do your, look that up and you can find that that's correct anytime you want to look it up. DARPA is not a for-profit entity, so by all means, instead of saying, haha, okay, buddy, tell me how you think DARPA is a privately owned for-profit capitalist entity. Nuclear squids, that was it. It wasn't nuclear radioactive chipmunks, it was nuclear squid ammunition, that's right. Oh, Copter. That's what happens when you're on stream with me and people have been drinking and that kind of thing. Was Amazon the company that owns Twitch created by DARPA as well? No, but you can't say that this entire thing is reliant on capitalism when the entire foundation of it was not. You can say capitalism has been a big part of it. You can say that, governmental and tax-funded stuff has been a big part of it. You don't get to lay it at the feet of one or the other. Do you have a book you would like me to read, Caedmon? Yes, compressed air squid launcher needs to be a thing. Yes, I think that would be a fascinating thing to see a contest about. Like paintball contest, except compressed air squid. Okay, Caedmon, because I'm not sure what that actually is about, I would say PM it to me so that I don't accidentally put something into the stream that has connotations that might upset people.
Hi.
But yeah, glaring. I am completely okay with the fact that capitalist enterprise has contributed to the success of the internet, but I am not going to grant the idea that it was entirely a capitalist thing, because it simply was not. Okay, well, send it to me by private message, and then after I've had a chance to look at it, maybe I will put it on my Amazon to-get book list. Also, if you want to talk about the greatness of capitalism, I have to be frank with you here, Glaring Husky. Using Amazon as your example of capitalism, when Amazon is known to be one of the most employee-abusing companies on the planet, you are certainly not picking a company to represent that side of the economic spectrum that is something other than a piece of dirt in terms of how it treats human beings. Why don't socialists move to Venezuela? Okay, so you're obviously a troll, that's okay. If you want to do a whole show on Venezuela, I'd be glad to do a show on it and absolutely bury you in facts that prove that socialism is not the problem with Venezuela, but rather outside influence from the United States that keeps fucking that country is the problem with Venezuela. But I doubt you would actually care to watch a show that demolishes your premise. Okay. I'm not sure why you can't, Caedmon. That's weird. Vuvuzela. Oh my, okay, I have to show you this. Hold on. Now you've just made me think of something when you're talking about Venezuela and you mentioned Vuvuzela. Hold on. Vuvuzela. Okay, so for those who like Guitar Hero, here we go, people. Boy, are you going to be sorry that we're doing this, but okay. Obviously, this is a parody. Oh, I love this bit. Ah, yes, Hypnotoad. Oh, I love that bit. Okay, Glaring Husky. So if Amazon is so terrible, why are you bringing money to their platform? Okay, so I'm going to make a request, which is if you're going to be a trolling chud, that you at least learn to use proper English when doing it and learn the difference between things like the different versions of the word there and such things like that. Because it's much easier to take you seriously when you are not using like third grade level English. But I mean, you do you. If you're going to be a troll, I guess I can't expect great levels of intellectual capability from you. Oh God, yeah. Left is Superman's weakness, the vuvuzela. It not kryptonite is vuvuzela. Rip Bareboon's RuneScape account. It was taken. Yes, that's true. I did try old school RuneScape at one point, and a Venezuelan hacker stole my account. Which is simply another reason on my long list of reasons not to continue playing old school RuneScape. But yeah, Glaring, you are the first troll of the day, so welcome. I may be poking a little fun at you here, but it's not a political conversation if at least one troll doesn't show up. So,
Go back under your bridge.
No, it's not that you disagree that's a troll. It's that you're making completely, fallaciously, badly reasoned arguments and are doing it just to kind of be a dork. But that's okay.
Tell him to go back under the bridge.
Yeah, my wife, Mrs. Barebones, says, go live back under your bridge, troll. Which is as good a response as any that I will ever hear. But Husky, you're allowed to disagree. But the kinds of disagreement you're making are not thoughtful or intended to produce interesting conversation. You're just trying to throw a wrench into the gears and see if things grind to a halt. But let me tell you just a little bit about myself here. Something you can see if you scroll down and you read the panels is that I spent quite a bit of time working for Yahoo News as a writer, and I have been trolled by people a lot better at it than you are. And didn't break me down then, you're certainly not going to break me down now.
Yeah,
You are really amateur hour compared to other trolls I have encountered. So you can rest assured that your best efforts are going to amount to absolutely zero. And that you're not going to throw me for a loop or put me off my game or cause any problems for the stream, because I've had to deal with much more interesting, well-spoken, and more effective trolls than you. Just the Automod caught one from you that says, now I'll stay in the home I bought for my family that I have worked my ass of for, proving once again that I'm going to allow it just so people can see your bad English. It's... And I used to say this when I was working for Yahoo News. I said, if you're going to send me, insults and death threats and whatever else for political pieces, at least use proper English when you're doing it, or I won't care. And I didn't really care even if they did use proper English, but it was kind of funny. Planes are fair and balanced in tank games. Oh, Copter. Oh,
Copter.
Yeah. So, yeah. No,
That's
Copter's
funny.
being a good doobie tonight. I'm very very happy to have him around.
Well, he's had a tough day.
Yeah, he's definitely had a tough day. But yeah, I mean, Glaring, keep on posting and using bad English and showing everybody exactly what the quality of your content is, because I'm totally okay with that. Off your bad autocorrect. Yeah, because so many autocorrects choose to remove an F off an actual known English word, right?
You didn't know that?
So now you're just trying too hard, because autocorrect doesn't work that way. But sure, maybe you have the world's worst autocorrect. Maybe you got your phone from Republicans R Us or something. Whatever. But yeah, troll if you want to. It's fun. You're just giving me content, so that's good. But yeah, if your comments had come in and you had said something like, can you discuss the idea? Hey, Cademon, thank you for the follow. Would you like to discuss the merits of Amazon as a company, or would you like to discuss how capitalism and public funding can, combine to produce the internet, that kind of thing? That would have been thoughtful and interesting. But when you come in just trying to throw silly statements out there, it isn't going to fly. I'm not going to dignify that. I'm certainly going to have more fun poking fun at you over it than trying to engage over what you're trying to create as a one-sided, hit comment rather than something thoughtful. I'll troll. Queen is a bad band. That gets people mad. I saw a great joke about anti-vaxxers that said it had a picture of the band Queen and its lead singer, and it said anti-vaxxers will not listen to this band because it contains too much mercury.
Oh.
I thought that was pretty hilarious. Communism works changed my mind. You know, it's interesting, Copter. We were talking earlier about whether or not capitalism works and what that means, and the fact is that capitalism does work, but only insofar as that the goal of capitalism is to make the rich richer and the poor poorer. So it does succeed in that goal. But the fact that capitalism works isn't necessarily good for a nation. And you don't have to be a capitalist, Larry. That's fine. You know, nobody says you have to subscribe to any particular economic theory. And I gotta give not giving my info definite props for actually getting the second P into Copter's name. That's good. Shows that you are paying attention. Communism would work, but people get greedy. You know, I've actually been saying for years, the main reason why communism and socialism struggle is that they require that people have a greater sense of community and altruism than we have been able to find in large groups of people so far. Whereas the reason capitalism works, and meaning that it allows the rich to stay rich and the poor get forced into ever-increasing poverty, is because its success is contingent entirely on the greed of the people working under that system. I'm just curious why people can't move past the construct of money, because the world we live in has gone significantly beyond the hunter-gatherer-barter economic stage. The world is so complex, and the economies and the goods and services we use have become so complex that you need a medium of exchange you can use to represent value across a broad range of goods and services. That's why. Not giving my info says, I'm not communist necessarily, I'm a real democratic socialist. Bernie is like the Pico de Gallo of leftism, too mild. I happen to be a Bernie fan because of the current crop of Democrat candidates, he most meshes with, with my views. Copter, guns should be mandatory. I disagree. I think, before you, your head explodes, I don't think gun ownership should be mandatory, but I do think gun safety courses should be mandatory. I think everybody should know how to safely handle a firearm and unload it to render it incapable of, discharging and injuring anybody. And I think that anybody who wants to learn basic marksmanship should probably be, given that opportunity. There might be clubs or local organizations, that type of thing. But I think that forcing people to own guns is as bad or worse than an idea about allowing nobody to do it, because I would like to think we can agree that there are some people who simply cannot be counted on to be safe while handling a firearm. People with certain kinds of mental illness, people with certain kinds of physical disability that keep them from handling any object with, average human dexterity. So requiring everybody to have guns carries a lot of risks that probably shouldn't be undertaken. Bernie will chop off your leg just to give you a crutch. And you see, that's exactly the kind of thing that demonstrates that you're a troll, Glaring. Well said. I appreciate you proving your trolliness so thoroughly. The working class is being strangled through taxation. Wrong. As anybody who has a Google account and wants to look up economic health statistics for our country's last 100 years can discover in about 5 seconds, the time from about the end of World War II till the Reagan era, when taxes were at their highest that they've ever been under any income tax plan this country has ever used, was also the time we had the greatest economic health, including and most focused on the working class. Taxes in and of themselves are not destructive. It's how the money is handled and where the taxes are applied and in what ways that are harmful, or can be harmful. They can also be very positive. I didn't even know there was such a thing as the Socialist Rifle Association. Either you're making that up and it's a hell of a joke, or it's something that would be interesting to hear more about. Caedmon, those who think owning guns might be inspired of the nuke balance among superpowers during the Cold War, maybe they're thinking If anyone owns weapons, nobody would dare use them because it would hit back on them. In a country that has more firearms in it than citizens, but still has one of the highest violent crime rates in the world and the single highest gun-related injury and death rate of any industrial nation on the planet, it is absolutely provable that having massive numbers of guns does not stop crime, violence, injury, death, any of it. There is no deterrent value to it. It simply escalates the level of damage when bad things happen. Wrong, I've only been working since I was 9 and started helping my single mother with bills when I turned 15, and I don't know what's causing my own financial hardships. Apparently not. If you think that taxation is what's causing your financial hardships, I can say unequivocally that you do not know what is causing your financial hardships, because taxation is not it. So let's give an example. Let's say, for the sake of argument, that your annual income is $50,000 a year. I don't know what you make, but let's use that as a round number. And let's say that between all of your income tax brackets, that you're losing 25% of that to tax, which is an overestimation because the 25% bracket doesn't start from the first dollar you earn. But let's just say it is, because that's a nice round number. That would leave you keeping $35,000 a year. If your income were $200,000 a year instead of $50,000 and you were still losing 25%, you would not be struggling financially. So it is not the fact that you are being taxed that is the problem. It's the fact that the economy is set up in a way where your income level is too low and that prices are out of control. So it is not the fact that taxes exist that's the problem. And again, you're talking to somebody who actually knows what he's talking about, because I have education in this particular field, including holding degrees with honors in it. So unless you have some type of expertise that qualifies you to be an expert at my level or higher, you're probably going to discover that you're outmatched when it comes to this topic, because you're just talking about your own personal experience, demonstrating you don't actually understand the factors that play into it, and acting like you've made a cogent point. Not giving my info, they believe in what the Black Panthers thought. It's interesting. Here's a fun fact for you. Ronald Reagan, before he was the darling of the Republican right, and, with everything that happened during the 80s in his presidency, he was extremely pro-gun control, because he was the governor of California during the time the Black Panthers were arming up. And he was one of the biggest proponents of gun control because he was scared of black people with guns. So the Conservative Party used to be very big on gun control when they thought it wasn't just going to be white Christian men buying the guns. And I've actually trolled a group on Facebook doing that in my home state, because they wanted to have an open carry rally at the State House, which is an idiotic idea, because having what amounts to an armed mob descend upon a state capitol is just an inherently stupid plan. And I threw a wrench into that by making a fake account with a name that sounded vaguely Middle Eastern. And I went to the Facebook group where they were organizing that, and I said, hey, I think this is a great idea. Me and all my friends from my mosque want to bring our AR-15s down and stand with you. When is the event? And suddenly the event was canceled, because they did not want a bunch of armed Muslims showing up for their armed white Christian dude party. So, it's amazing how right-wing people suddenly change their stance when they think somebody that scares them might have a gun. Let's see. So the $400 a month I pay in taxes isn't causing me problems. No, the $400 a month you're paying in taxes is not your problem. The problem is that the rest of your income is not high enough to cover your expenses. Again, if you were making $100,000 a year more, $400 a month would not be an issue. It is not the taxes that are the problem. It's the income level. But again, I can only repeat that so many times, and you try to bounce it off whatever right-wing reality barrier you currently are trying to operate behind. That's before it becomes a pointless conversational topic. Cademon, I live in a high taxation country. What country is that? Not giving. He got the degree from PragerU. No, I am about as anti-PragerU as you're likely to see on Twitch. PragerU is, number one, it's not even a university. It's about as much of a university as Trump's fake university was. Hang on a second. Wife trying to get my attention. I need to mute for a second. Me that 10 minutes ago I said I would be making her dinner soon, so I'm going to need to wrap up pretty quickly here. Let's see, blah, blah, blah. He got the degree from you already just now. And I lose nearly $3K a paycheck to taxes. But you also have a high-income combat pay-related job guarding, cargo ships from pirates. So, plus if you're losing $3K a paycheck to taxes, you should employ an accountant to help you organize your finances better. Yes, basically, gun control at that time in California was meant to keep guns out of the hands of the disenfranchised. Sweden, okay. Interesting. At some point we might have a conversation about what life is like in Sweden as a high-tax country. Glaring Husky, my income is just fine. Apparently not if $400 a month is breaking your financial back. You are not going to win this argument, Glaring, because you are speaking from an incorrectly understood first-person perspective, and you are demonstrating a serious lack of understanding of the factors that actually govern the way economics works. Not giving my info. No, I meant Husky got his degree. Oh, I gotcha. It sounds to me more like Husky got his degree from the bottom of a Cracker Jack box. I wouldn't even want to give him the credit of saying it came from PragerU. Hope to see you another time. My paycheck without taxes is a little over $10K, and I don't care about losing some to taxes if it means someone can get the medical help for free. And that, Copter, is an excellent philosophy to have. And there you go, Glaring. Copter loses a lot more than you per paycheck, and he's doing just fine. So, maybe you should rethink these claims you're making and actually have some more foundation to them before you post. I have won the argument because you haven't convinced me and engage in a cowardly ad hom. I'm only engaging in ad hominem because you have obviously shown up here to be a troll, and I'm just amusing myself with you before I ban you. But if you want to have reasonable discussions in the future, you're welcome to do that. If you don't think you can manage that, then I can just ban you, because, discussion and debate is fine. You should ask Copter about some of the long debates we've had about everything from gun control to trans rights. And we don't always end up on the same side of those arguments, but he is respectful and intelligent and thoughtful and engages in honest conversation, as opposed to being an underbridge dwelling troll. So, there's a huge difference. But yeah, you can simply declare victory, kick the board over, and take a massive dump in your own pants, and that's fine if that's what you consider to be victory. But we have somewhat higher standards here about what victory means. You'll never use debates when you label someone a troll. No, I don't win debates by labeling people trolls. I label people trolls when they're trolls, and I win debates by winning debates. But I don't debate with trolls. So, can you ban him? Copter, I don't think you're a mod on this channel. So, I don't think you can. But I'll tell you what. Type F in chat if you would like me to ban Glaring Husky for reason of being a troll. Let's be democratic here. Type F in chat to ban Glaring Husky. I agree, not giving my info. I'm just waiting to see how many Fs I get that for me to ban Husky. Can I be a mod for a few seconds so you can ban him? Oh, Glaring, you are not making too many points with anybody here. You are simply proving yourself to be an inconsiderate troll with very little to offer. Cademan, as I see it, after a while, more and more things are held up by tax money, and more fields seem to be fueled by tax money, and instead be careful which things tax money should be upheld. They rather raise the taxes, but the problem is growing, and today we came to the point that tax money is used so many fields they aren't supposed to be used in, so more and more people are for lesser taxes because of lots of Fs. Now, see, that's an interesting case. In Sweden, you actually have high enough taxes that can become a very different economic factor than the way they're applied here in the States. I'm a working class citizen that's tired of being screwed over. If that's the case, you should be voting for Bernie Sanders, because almost in its entirety, the factors that negatively impact your economic well-being come from the right wing. And if you actually want to have a genuine discussion about that, we can do that on an upcoming show. But if you're just going to be here saying, I'm working class, I'm right, I won, I'm whatever, and then throw a bunch of unsubstantiated claims into the chat and, act all huffy, then no, we're not going to engage with that. So. Yeah, sometimes trolls make for amusing content, not going to lie. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to wrap up and make dinner for my wife. I am not going to ban Husky for the moment. I will time him out temporarily so that he can't contribute any more negativity for this afternoon stream. So he's just gotten a 10-minute timeout. But he can come back another day if he is ready to act in good faith and make some better points without, just throwing unsubstantiated claims into the fray. I said social democrats can't grasp this reality that taxes can be too high. Yes, it is possible for taxes to be too high. That is definitely true, but it does not apply in the case of our recently silenced troll, whose income is not being taxed at the rate that you would see in Sweden. You enjoy using the banhammer. Well, okay, I really want to thank the folks who showed up today, with the exception of the troll, who I actually will still thank because he at least gave us a few minutes of amusing back and forth. But I will be streaming as usual Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and I will be back again on, let's say it's Friday, I'll be back again on Monday at around 4 p.m., and we'll have either a continuation of this or a new topic, depending on what's happening in the news that day. So you all have a wonderful weekend, and I will catch you again real soon. Have a great night.